The letter came to Kristen Schoenveld after months of hormone injections after a long flight out to San Francisco. The letter came anonymously, handwritten in blue ink, written in immaculate cursive. The letter came after a decision that wasn't easy, but then again was easy because it tore at Kristen's soul. The thought of a woman wanting a child and not being able to have one. October 13, 1994. Dear Kristen, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for helping us try to have a baby. You sound to us like a wonderful, wonderful person. We hope this whole experience hasn't been too tough on you. Take good care of yourself and know that your gift to us means the world to us. Sincerely, hopeful parents. Earlier that year in 1994, Kristen had read an article in a magazine about being an egg donor. It struck her. She was 25 years old and adopted. She sent in an application with a photo and a letter. From more than 200 donors, the couple chose her. When Kristen returned to Indiana from that trip to California, her heart was full, and it was empty. She knew the egg retrieval was a success, but would never know if a baby was born to that couple. I occasionally marveled at the idea that I might have a biological child out there, Kristen said. But I never really gave it much more of a thought. I wasn't ever going to know about what came of that anyway. More than 20 years later, Kristen would know what came of that donation in 1994. She would find a young man searching for her biological son, Parker Erickson. She would meet him and see that he looks uncannily like her. And she would meet his mother, the woman who wrote that letter. But before all of that, Kristen would first adopt a son of her own. An adoption that was born through a series of twists of fate. Death, grief, joy, love, and new beginnings. A journey she never saw coming. Kristen, who by 49 had never married or had children of her own, spent her career working with adults who have special needs. It was a passion she found in high school at North Central. During her study halls as a teen, she would volunteer at a school across the street for kids with special needs. While in college, Kristen took a semester off to work at Nora Elementary as an assistant in a second-grade special education class. Inside that room, a boy named Nick stole her heart. He was stubborn and sweet. He was funny and loved to color. Her adoration of him and his of her wasn't lost on Nick's parents. That summer, Nick's parents, Brian and Grace Schoenveld, hired Kristen, then Kristen Tuller, to be a nanny for the family. To drive their older daughter Kim to sports, to care for Nick, who has Down syndrome. It was a wonderful summer of trips to Glendale Mall, to the zoo and out to eat at the Cooker, Nick's favorite restaurant. While Kim was doing sports, Kristen and Nick grew close. She took him to glamour shots for a glitzy photo of the two dressed up. She watched all his favorite TV shows with him. Wayne's World had come out earlier that year and Nick was obsessed with it. He insisted all summer that he was Wayne and Kristen was Garth. But as often happens, people move on. Life eventually took us in different directions, she said, and we lost touch with each other. Kristen went on with her life, but she never forgot Nick. Nick was the third child born to Brian and Grace Schoenveld. The couple married young. Brian was just 17 when he, Grace, and their 2-month-old daughter Marilee moved to Bloomington. Brian was studying pre-med at Indiana University. Tragedy struck when Marilee was diagnosed with leukemia. Grace spent every day and night at Riley Hospital for Children by her daughter's side. She learned all about the medical world, how to do all the things the nurses did for Marilee. She noticed which nurses were compassionate and noticed the ones who were not. When Marilee died at 3, the couple was devastated. Brian still had another year at IU, no longer studying medicine but getting his degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. Grace took her grief and decided to study to become a nurse. She poured her heart and soul into those classes, each day thinking about the daughter she had lost. When Grace graduated from nursing school, she was nearly 9 months pregnant with the couple's second daughter, Kim. After giving birth to Kim, Grace began a decades-long career in nursing, never forgetting Marilee. Grace was the absolute most dedicated, wonderful nurse, Brian said. She understood. When the couple became pregnant with their third child and Nick was born, Brian was in the delivery room. He immediately noticed Nick's eyes looked different. Doctors noticed webbing on Nick's thumbs, his lack of muscle tone. Brian and Grace were told Nick had Down syndrome. Just as she had been for Marilee, Grace was there for Nick at the hospital and doctor's appointments as he battled intestinal issues, heart troubles, and childhood leukemia. If Grace had not been a nurse, he would have succumbed early in his life, Brian said, but she knew exactly what to do and what to look for. Nick thrived, and he grew into a happy young boy, a boy who fell in love with a blonde nanny named Kristen. Kristen was adopted in 1969 in a closed adoption by her parents, Ken and Betty Tuller, through the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis. She grew up with 3 brothers and 1 sister. 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister were also adopted. The Tullers had been told by doctors they would never have biological children, but that 3rd brother was born to Betty Tuller when she was 40. Kristen's childhood was wonderful. Her parents showered all their children with unconditional love and joy. The Tullers also told their adopted children early on that they were not their biological parents. "My parents were amazing," Kristen said. "But I also was very curious about my adoption and always wanted to know the answers about where I came from." In her late teens, Kristen requested information about her adoption from the Children's Bureau. At that time, the state of Indiana provided only non-identifying information to adoptees about their biological parents. Kristen still has a typed piece of paper that she held onto and treasured for 30 years. On the paper was a description of her biological parents and their immediate families, but no names and no clues as to who they were, where to find them, or why she had been put up for adoption. "I never stopped wondering where I came from," she said, "but I went on with my life." She went on to nanny for Nick. She went on to be an egg donor. She went on to a life working with adults with special needs. It was 2011 when Kristen became involved with Special Olympics. She had begun working with a new client, Kelly Schreiner, who came to her with a dilemma. Kelly's basketball team needed partners to compete that season, and she wanted Kristen to play. Growing up, Kristen had loved sports, often organizing huge competitions in her yard with friends. Special Olympics gave her the same thrill she had as a child. "I was hooked," she said. That next spring, Kristen went with Kelly to track practice, and as they were walking the backstretch, there was Nick. It was as if 20 years hadn't passed. Nick knew who Kristen was right away, and it was like old times, Wayne and Garth back together. They walked and talked about that summer in the early 1990s, and Nick took Kristen over to say hi to his mom, Grace. Grace was the beloved coordinator for Washington Township Special Olympics. "She was a beautiful and gentle soul and an incredible leader," Kristen said. The 2 women became close. Grace started mentoring Kristen in Special Olympics and helped her find more volunteer roles. Nick and Kristen spent more and more time together. Kristen and Nick's parents, Brian and Grace, spent more and more time together. It would be a godsend that Kristen came back into Nick's life, because not long after, devastation struck. At 60, Grace found out she had lung cancer. Grace had never smoked, but grew up in a house with parents who smoked. She very quietly battled the disease and continued her role as our incredible leader, Kristen said. But Grace was tired and sick. Kristen became like a second mom to Nick, picking him up nearly every day to spend time with her. Just months before Grace's death, she and Kristen worked at a golf outing, sitting together that fall day talking a lot. Grace never asked Kristen, in so many words, to take care of Nick if she died. "But she latched on to me at that day," Kristen said, "and you know, there were some really sweet moments with her." Grace died in January 2015, leaving behind a family who adored her. "She was amazing," said Kim Knox, Brian and Grace's daughter. "Every year that my kids get older, I miss her a little more. I think of all the conversations I would have liked to have had. Grace always took great care of herself," Kim said, "because she wanted to be around for as long as she could for Nick." After Grace's death, Kristen began to worry about both Brian and Nick. Grace was Nick's main caregiver. Brian was grieving, and he seemed lost. "I knew Brian was struggling," Kristen said. "I began checking in with him often, which was easy to do because I was at the house most days picking up and bringing home Nick." Nick, grieving his mom's death, wasn't going to let Kristen get away. "Nick would say to me as I pulled up into his driveway to drop him home, 'What are we doing tomorrow?' Kristen said. There was no resisting that. So whenever I was available, I would pick him up and take him with me for the day. It was because of Nick's insistence on seeing Kristen that Brian and she spent so much time together." It was because of Nick that Kristen built a close friendship with Brian. That friendship would soon blossom into something wonderful, and Kristen would gain a husband and her first son. It started with extra food. At the end of the day, when Kristen would bring Nick home, Brian would be grilling, getting dinner ready. "I love how organically it started," said Kim. "My dad loved my mom so much, but he and Kristen had companionship and he is practical. Why we have extra food and not offer it? Obviously, Nick is not going to object because he adores her." Brian invited Kristen to join him and Nick for dinner. In those early days, Kristen would leave after they ate. But one night she asked Brian if he liked to watch TV. He joked that he was a world-class television watcher. They bonded over Survivor and American Idol. Brian cried a lot. He talked about Grace a lot. "I knew how sad Brian and Nick were," Kristen said. And here they were just trying to do this together, to survive. Brian and Kristen started giving one another little gifts. DVDs for Brian, vitamins, and a Costco membership for Kristen. The gifts turned into outings together with special needs adults. Then came an accidental message to Kristen from Brian meant for his daughter. "Hey, I'm available to go to the KFC, Knights of Columbus. Breakfast if you want to go." Kristen stared at that text. I was like, "Oh my gosh. Brian just asked me out," she said. "And oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Now it's for real. He just put himself out there." Kristen answered yes. Brian wrote back, "That wasn't meant for you, but you can go if you want." She went to that breakfast. From there, Brian, then 64, and Kristen, 49, fell in love. But it was more than two hearts coming together. "I saw how absolutely wonderful her and Nick just intertwined," Brian said. "Nick's got a friend, a very good friend, and more importantly, a caretaker who obviously loves him to death." In January 2018, Kristen and Brian were married. 4 months later, Kristen adopted Nick at the Indianapolis City County building, the same place her parents had adopted her 49 years before. "We were surrounded by family and close friends, and it was a surreal day," Kristen said. "Absolutely perfect." That adoption, though, brought memories back for Kristen. It stirred emotions and a newfound curiosity about her biological parents. She bought a DNA kit and submitted it. 3 weeks after sending in her sample, Kristen was staring at the name of her biological mother. The next day, she wrote the woman a letter and her biological mom answered right away. That began a series of letters back and forth. Her biological mom was living in California, but soon moved to Evansville to care for her ailing mother, Kristen's biological grandmother. While Kristen wanted to meet her biological mother, her biological mom was hesitant. She had kept Kristen a secret from everyone. Kristen also still wondered about her biological father, but her biological mom wasn't offering any clues and Kristen didn't want to pressure her. Instead, she decided to try another DNA kit to see if she could find him. In October 2019, 2 weeks after sending in her sample, an email came. Her results were in and Kristen had a strong relational male match at the very top. Maybe this was her dad. "I was staring at the word son at the top of my results list," Kristen said, "and I couldn't even register what was going on." She clicked on the man's profile and read a message he had written under his photo. He was searching for his biological mom. He had been conceived via in vitro fertilization using an egg donor. "I couldn't even comprehend what was happening," Kristen said. "It was so unbelievable." Kristen had to meet him. She had to see her second son. At a quaint retirement home in Evansville in November 2019, worlds collided. Kristen met her biological mother, her biological grandmother, a biological sister she had found too, and her biological son, Parker Erickson. 4 generations meeting for the first time. Kristen's mom also met her biological mom. It was a weekend filled with hugs, lots of laughter, and new bonds. Kristen found out that Parker had been searching for her for 2 years. Kristen is grateful for that meeting. In October 2020, her biological grandmother died. In April, her biological mother died. Since, her relationship with Parker has flourished. In June, he and his girlfriend, having just graduated from college, took a cross-country road trip. They stopped in Indianapolis and visited with Brian, Kristen, and Nick for a week. "It was an incredible visit that most definitely sealed our bond for life," she said. Parker and Nick have quickly become close brothers. In fact, one of the first things Parker said to Nick when he met him, You know, I've always wanted a brother. The genuine way he interacts with Nick is just as effortless as Kristen, said Kim. I think it must be a gene. He has it too. Parker and his girlfriend have since settled in Boulder, Colorado, but they have plans, Kristen said, plans to become volunteers for Special Olympics. Just like his biological mom, entwined in the incredible story of Kristen's life is the tireless work she does with Special Olympics. She was named Special Olympics Indiana's Volunteer of the Year for 2021. She coaches basketball, partners in Bach and drives athletes anywhere they need to be. During the pandemic, when athletes were stuck at home, Kristen organized Zoom meetings with games, online bingo, and book clubs. She was just absolutely fabulous, said Richard Schreiner, whose daughter Kelly helped reconnect Kristen and Nick at that track practice. She made that time where they couldn't do anything, she gave them something to do. Just amazing. Kristen, like Grace, is beloved by the athletes. They follow her around like she's the Pied Piper, said Brian. I mean, everybody wants to be with Kristen. They just hang on her, but it's because she is genuinely interested in every one of these athletes. She loves them, and they love her. But perhaps none loves her more than Nick. Nick is sitting on a chair next to Kristen coloring with markers. Ryan is on the couch next to his wife, talking about how lucky he is that Kristen came into his life. I don't know what would have happened, he said, if we didn't have her. As Brian is talking, Kristen looks over at Nick and gives him a smile. He stops and stares right into her eyes, smiling back. I just can't imagine that there is any higher level of love, she said. I just can't. Nick sometimes calls Kristen by her first name. Sometimes he calls her mom. When they are out together and people ask if Kristen is his mom, Nick says yes. When asked what he loves most about Kristen, Nick makes his feelings clear. That she's my mom, he said. Mom. Kristen is now mom to 2 sons, and along the way has gotten so much more. In 5 years, she has gained a husband, an adopted son, a biological son, a stepdaughter, 3 grandchildren, a biological mother, 2 sisters, and then, of course, all the extended family. An added blessing came that day in Evansville when Kristen got to meet Parker's mom, the woman who wrote that letter. There's this little part of meeting her that was almost extra special, she said. Parker's mom's name is Kristen, too. The two discovered they were both named after the same main character of a trilogy of historical novels written in the early 1920s, Kristen Lavrenstatter. Parker's mom was 45 when she had him and is now in her 70s. In fact, she and Kristen's biological mom have the same birth date and are the same age. As Kim says, there are so many twists and turns to this story. Twists and turns, fate and chance. Kristen thought her life was amazing and complete when she was single without kids. Now, everything that I ever dreamed has come true, she said. My world is so much bigger and so much more wonderful now.